We do poses.
Welcome to the Happily Ever Laughter podcast.
A positive space where we try to find the humor in the craziness of life.
Because life is crazy.
That's for sure.
I'm Matt.
And I'm Danae.
And now, on with the show. Welcome back to the Happily Ever Laughter podcast, everybody. I'm Matt.
And I'm Danae.
And we are back. This is our first full episode for season 2 of our third iteration of our podcast. Or third podcast.
Attempt.
Yes.
Really?
To find out the style and what we want to do and what we find the most interesting.
And we're still learning as we go, obviously.
For sure.
You've been fiddling with all sorts of settings on all of our stuff lately. Obviously, we've got this setup back here that we've been utilizing for other things, but now we're going to do it for this too. So it's a work in progress when, we're not going to get it right all the time, but we're trying and we're going to keep going this time, we hope.
For sure.
So,
and that's for the listeners, actually. So if you're on YouTube right now, you can see us and you can see all that stuff. If you're on YouTube right now, you can see I just got a brand new haircut.
Oh.
Check this bad boy out. Oh, hello. Hey.
Nice fade.
Thank you.
Looks good. I agree.
I appreciate it.
You're welcome. Anyway, it's one of those, like, your haircut is just very minimal a lot of times.
I know.
Clean up a lot. I mean.
The thing that makes me sad is sometimes I'll grow the top out and keep the sides short, or I'll want to go, I've never had long hair, so I'll try to start growing it again. And inevitably, I know that I look the best with kind of the generic fade on the sides, 1.5 inches on top, spike it up, do your thing.
You don't need to rock the boat all the time. You have grown your hair out before, I will say. And personally, I do have a favorite haircut of yours.
Oh.
And it's not long hair.
Oh, fine.
It's not shaved head either, because he's done that as well.
Yeah, shaved head is not good for me, and I'm not a big fan of you with a perm.
No.
So at least we both have.
Well, okay. So that's the funny part, because I have naturally curly hair, right?
Yes.
But I got a perm, right, like when we were first married.
Okay.
Because I had no idea how to actually style natural curls back then.
Right.
Right? And it was a terrible, terrible, terrible mistake. But since then, I've tried to embrace my natural texture and just I stopped dyeing my hair and everything.
Yeah.
So it's a lot easier now, and I don't have to get a perm.
Now we're all showing the gray. I got gray in my beard. You got you've got a gray streak like Rogue in your hair, which is pretty sick.
She was my favorite ex-person.
Don't touch me, because you'll steal all my power. No!
So
now that we've unnecessarily talked about each other's hair for a little while, we might as well jump into our episode today. This is our Stay Curious series.
Yeah, I wanted to start a series like this because there's so many topics that lately we have been very interested in learning about. Anything from kind of stuff that when we were growing up was kind of taboo to learn about, or it just was non-existent to really, our area. So stuff like tarot, like we've got a friend that reads tarot cards and stuff like that now.
And we definitely want to have her come on and do an episode with us. Addie, if you're listening, let's do another episode.
But yeah, it's stuff like that, but also things that just I think there's a lot of topics out there right now that people are very judgmental about, I think.
Yep.
And I think the more that you learn about something, the more, your mind is open to different ideas that you'd never thought about before, or perspectives, for example.
Mm-hmm.
So I wanted this to be kind of a series, but I figured the best way to get into it was actually to talk about Ted Lasso.
Ted Lasso is a great example for anything that anybody would want to use, I would think.
We'll just warn you, there will be spoilers because we're going to talk about the show. If you have not seen the Ted Lasso show on Apple TV before,
yes,
it's great. We'll just preface that it's probably one of our favorite TV series of the past, few years. There's so many that we'd like to talk about, and we probably will going forward. But this one in particular, because of the attitude of the whole thing.
For sure.
So, you want to go into that a little bit? What your favorite parts are?
Well, everything is, there's not a lot of TV series out there that are just full on positivity.
Or tries to be.
Yes.
Tries to turn it into that.
I mean, I know there's some serious moments, and I know there's some elements in there where it is whatever, but the show itself, for the most part, tries to be a very positive, happy show.
About kindness and helping each other
Yes.
and getting through mental health, issues and
Correct.
things like that, which I didn't expect going in. We were just like, okay, this is Jason Sudeikis and it's a soccer team. We're going to, be a sports show, which I'm fine with. I like sports. It's not necessarily like my favorite genre of stuff, but surprisingly, same thing with our kids. Our middle daughter, Chloe, this is literally one of her favorite shows.
Right.
Which she didn't think she would get into at all. So it's not just about sports, I guess, is what we're getting into.
It's really about heart.
Yeah. And I think for a time where everything seems so bleak sometimes and people can be so nasty to each other, this was a breath of fresh air.
100%.
And so how this ties into the stay curious thing is that there is a particular scene early on in the series where Jason Sudeikis' character, Ted,
Yep.
the main character, is playing darts against what we'll call the villain of the series later on.
Who is essentially the villain
Yeah.
of the series.
He's a terrible person.
Yeah.
And because that's the thing, you're always going to have that, push and pull of like, okay, how can we, quote unquote, defeat this person with kindness really is kind of throughout the show is like people kind of, we're like, we don't need to go along with that.
Yeah.
But he does this quote in the scene and they're playing darts and it's be curious, not judgmental. And I believe it's based on like a Walt Whitman quote at some point. I should have looked that up, but I didn't. But anyway, that's in the show.
I'll look it up while we're doing it.
But basically it's just saying, try not to make assumptions about things because the whole point of the scene is that, he's this American that doesn't really know anything in the UK. He's trying to do all these things and coach a UK Premier League soccer team. And the other owner, who's the villain, thinks nothing of him. And he's like, I'm totally going to beat this guy. And they have this bet going on. But the thing is like, it's be curious about a person because you never know what they've gone through and don't make assumptions. And it turns out that Ted beats the guy because he assumed he was going to win, basically, because he knew nothing really about Ted and his character and where he came from. So I don't know. I just really appreciated that whole scene because it made me think about all the times that people just make assumptions about things that they don't really know about. And, that can kind of get you in trouble about things.
Mm-hmm.
So
we live in a society right now where everyone is so quick to judgment. Social media is instantaneously on any situation.
It's like you got to pick sides somehow.
Well, and a lot of people like don't even vet anything first. It's just what matches my perspective and what will my whatever.
Well, that's called confirmation bias, right?
Right. But I mean, that's pretty much essentially what you're talking about too, is people not knowing really what's going on in people's lives.
And so they make those judgments, snap judgments based on whatever their perspective is. And I think it's really important, especially when you meet new people, to stay curious, to be, more open-minded, especially if they're not like you, right? If they're from a different country or culture or whatever it is, ask questions genuinely to learn, not just to like have a comeback, if that makes sense.
Right. And sadly, in society, it seems like that's where we are at the moment, rather than just being genuine. Hey, I want to learn more about you and why you are the way you are, think the way you are, what you've been through, because you can learn so much about a person from learning all of that past.
Yeah. And, I think this could go for concepts and stuff too, not just people that you meet. It's, it could be all the different ideas and, you don't know what you don't know, I guess. That's kind of where I'm coming from with some of this stuff. And I think being open-minded in general has helped us just, grow as people, what we met when we were teenagers.
Immensely, yes.
And then, I'm glad because I've seen so many couples our age that, got divorced or whatever because they didn't stay on the same page of learning,
Yeah.
It feels like a lot of times one just kind of like is just set in their place and they've stopped growing and then they kind of grow apart because of that.
Yeah.
We, on the other hand, I feel like because we met so young, we've also like grown a lot together. And so concepts even from the, like, growing up in religion and to where we are now and how we've chosen to parent our kids isn't the same as it was, 10 years ago
Right.
when they were little. So I feel like this has also helped us grow with our whole family in general, just kind of because that, be curious, not judgmental has kind of become a family mantra with us, because even when they're going through stuff, we try very hard to like see it from their perspective before we just jump right in and be like, you're wrong.
Yes.
Because that's a lot of what we got, growing up is just.
Well, we have an episode coming up about neurodivergency, and we have neurodivergency in our family. And so I think that has also helped us learn to hesitate for a second, learn new information, especially for...
Gosh, when you're parenting, it's so hard.
Yes.
Because you naturally want to go into the way that you were parented because it's what you know, right? It's like, well, this is how I should be because this is the way my parents were. But, especially if you start getting into some struggle areas like we did, trying to figure out what's going on with our kids when they were starting to get diagnosed with like ADHD and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
It kind of really opened our eyes, and we took the route of wanting to learn more about it rather than be like, because I hate to say it, but there's so many parents, even our kids know, that are their kids, they're like, you don't have ADHD. That's not real.
Yeah.
And it's not going to make anything better for sure to not learn anything about it.
Right.
So.
Well, and I hate to bring it back to this point as well, but I know a lot of stuff happened because of COVID. That's when we started our podcast.
Yeah.
That's when all of this started happening. And I think the reaction to COVID is what really jump-started you and I even more so, because the first information came out. Mm-hmm. We all had a preconceived notion of what COVID was, what would happen, what would, and then the scientists went through, the actual people that know what they're talking about gave us new information because they found new information. But then there's still a big chunk of the country that's like, no, you already said this is the way. So
and that's the thing about science, is it's constantly changing, but there is this pushback with people that is like, no, you told us one thing, you can't change your mind. And it's like, that's not how the real world works, though. You got to really stay open-minded about things, especially when they're changing so quickly. And honestly, there's a lot of times you don't know what's really going on. And the internet is, a double-edged sword, because you can have so many different opinions and information, and you don't know what's right and what's wrong.
Right.
So you kind of have to discern for yourself, well, what am I going to believe? But then it's like, well, but I'm not going to believe the experts that have studied their whole lives. I'd rather listen to this, person on the internet say their opinion. And it just gets so convoluted, and I think that's where we are in a lot of different areas right now.
Well, and I didn't mean to take us off track, but that was essentially the reasoning, what I was saying for what you're talking about right here, being open-minded, staying curious. Because if you're not continually learning and you're just stuck, then you're never going to grow as a person.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I don't think
and
personally.
I think, getting back to your point about COVID, though, it kind of shocked everybody's system.
Right. And that's what I meant. Like it forced everyone to start really thinking.
Reevaluate things.
And then it forced a lot of people that don't think, that they decided they don't need to think.
Well, I mean, ignorance is bliss. We talked about this as well.
Is so true.
Because, the more you think about things and the more you start to understand how things really work, it's not a pleasant, thought process a lot of times to sit and mull things over. So I envy people that can just turn that off, that just like, nope, I don't need to learn more about that. Or I don't need to check on that. And they just like would rather put their blinders on and be like, this is how things are and this is my worldview and I'm not going to change it.
Right.
But it also stagnates you. Like you said, there's no way to grow if you're not questioning things, if you're not trying to understand things from a different perspective. Maybe you weren't right about certain things, and it's okay to admit that.
I think that's the biggest fear that people have, is for some reason, if they say that they were wrong or they didn't understand something,
or that you could change your mind.
Right. Their embarrassment is more of a thing than actually learning and growing, where I think most people would be fine with anybody if they kind of said, hey, you know what? I was wrong. I learned new information. That was my thought back at this point. Would be such an easier pill to swallow, if that makes sense.
Yeah. I mean,
rather than just being stubborn.
When your worldview is never challenged, then you're just complacent and everything's fine. You don't have to worry about things.
That's true.
I think, with COVID, with everything that's happened, with the internet at large, it's really hard to not have your worldview challenged. So I guess in this whole series is to just talk about, like, keep that curiosity going. Don't just automatically think that it's bad if you're learning something new.
Right.
And new information can always help you figure things out and maybe be a little kinder. I think that's going back to the show, and throughout it, there was a lot of touching on mental health, which was big. I didn't expect a lot of that out of that show, but I really appreciated it because it's real life. We're all going through stuff like that. And the fact that we can talk about it more now, I think tremendously helps people. So
well, and it has brought everything to the forefront so much more, which when we were younger, I guarantee at this point we both, well, I'm on ADHD medication now. You're not yet, but you probably should be. That's where our kids got it. But that,
and you're learning that too. It's like, okay, yeah, this stuff is genetic. It's not just imaginary.
That also came from our parents. But back when we were younger, it was kind of, oh, you're just way too hyper. Go outside, run it off. Or, hey, you hurt yourself, rub some dirt on it. I'm glad that we're kind of to the point.
And talking about emotions or things like mental health was absolutely not talked about when we were growing up. So.
Which I think is the biggest issue for me right now is the emotion thing that you're just talking about. Because there's so many men on the internet that are, I don't know if you're afraid of emotions and thinking that makes you weak, but I think being more in tune with your emotions and speaking out on those emotions, I think makes you more manly. You have a whole section of people that are following,
what is it, red pill content or just the?
Yeah.
What do you mean?
Well, like who's the dude that always looks like Gollum that they're always showing pictures of?
Yeah, we don't need to say his name.
But people that are following that path but the similar thing is they're also just kind of alone and they don't know what to do and they find something that validates
and I think
their perspective.
With men in particular, is you're not taught emotions or what's acceptable emotions other than just anger.
For
that's
sure.
Really the only, at least when we were growing up specifically, it wasn't okay for guys to feel things. Oddly, even though you're human, everybody does. And we'd all very much benefit if we could all get a handle on them. It's funny because we talked about this with our kids. They have this little app that helps them kind of determine what emotions are, and kind of feel like, so that they can put a name to it.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just very, very helpful when we talk to our kids. It's like, well, how are you really feeling about this? And when you don't have the words, like you're saying, a lot of men your age especially grew up not having, not understanding, oh, this is what this is. This isn't just, and when you don't know how to name it and it turns into frustration, which turns into anger, which turns into all kinds of crap that, we have to deal with now and everybody at large has to deal with. So.
Well, and that'll be a goal throughout my time on this podcast, if you continue to listen to us, is to change the stigma for men and what they think should and shouldn't be
allowed. It's like,
allowed in society.
You're human.
Yeah.
We're all human. And we all have the same emotions, and we can figure out, how to express things better than a lot of people are doing these days.
Right.
Just coming at people or getting violent and all of that kind of stuff. And it all just boils down to just not feeling validated and not understanding what you're going through.
Right.
Or feeling like you're being listened to.
Yeah.
And I think that goes back to the stay curious stuff. Is like, I really wish people would, when they meet people, new people, or, they're talking to people that maybe have different viewpoints, is to just try to understand and find that common ground, because it's there. It's always there. but don't just automatically put a wall up and start being judgmental about things that you really, really don't know about. So
I feel like that's tough right now because society in general, specifically the last couple presidencies, have taught us if somebody thinks differently than you, then they are instantly the enemy.
against you.
Yes.
And it's just like,
And you shouldn't
we've
believe
got
anything they
to
say.
wake up
And
out of that.
man, it's so hard to even have conversations anymore.
Yeah. And it's tough because, you know, there's this idea of like, it gives people, when they become judgmental, I feel like they fail to get along, and then they're just like, I got to put this wall up. I don't need to interact with you anymore. And it's just like, we're never going to get anywhere as a society if that's the attitude.
Right.
I did write down, there's a couple other things.
That's also recently why I've become a hermit, though.
Because you don't want to have conversations.
I just don't want to have those anymore. I'm at the age in
Well,
my life where I'm like, I don't need to listen to your own research horse crap.
Well,
that
but
you've
that's the
looked up.
thing. If it comes down to genuine wanting to trade ideas and genuine, like, trying to learn about somebody, that's different. I feel like.
Especially it's hard when you're the one trying and the other people are instantly fighting you constantly.
Mm-hmm.
So eventually you just get apathetic and you're like, I don't even want to
Like,
fight the battle
I
anymore.
can't talk to you because you're just not even willing to hear a different side.
Right.
You know, timely, because we're going into Martin Luther King Jr.'s holiday coming up.
On Monday.
I have a quote, and it was I was thinking about, well, what makes people judgmental. He had a quote. It says, people fail to get along because they fear each other. They fear each other because they don't know each other, and they don't know each other because they have not communicated with each other. And I feel like that's really boils down. We talk about this so much. It's like, well, every argument or every miscommunication is because they just didn't talk to each other and really try to learn
Well, and
what's
we
going
kind of
on.
talked about this the other night. I know you'll realize too, the more you listen to this podcast, I'm the one that takes us down the wrong path all the time because I'm like, oh, speaking of this.
Squirrel. Anyway.
Also, speaking of the ADHD stuff. But you and I were talking about it the other day of kind of fear is a motivator in a lot of stuff. And there's like a fear.
Is your phone going off? Or is my phone going off?
What am I hearing?
I know, I heard it too.
That's
Sorry.
the craziest thing.
It's in our headphones or something.
Man, I got so distracted.
Speaking of,
I'm watching the video now. We have this going on. We have the. It's going to take us a little while to get used to.
Yeah.
Not
being distracted.
I might just have to turn off the computer camera at this point because I'm like, I can't.
You gotta watch
focus
yourself.
because I'm focusing on all of that stuff.
Anyway.
So back to what we were talking about. What we were talking about? Fear.
Fear.
Yes. Fear is a movie. Mark Wahlberg is in it.
You haven't yet to watch, by the way. I keep telling him he needs to watch it. He never watched this.
But basically, you and I were talking about it the other night. Fear currently is such a huge motivator within our society. I know there is a lot of political people that use fear of whatever it is.
Anything different.
But I think
really.
most of it is exactly what you're talking about. People aren't curious. People aren't stepping outside of their bubbles. You and I talked about this the other night, the craziest thing, and it all depends on where you are. If you never leave your bubble, you will never
Or like traveling, because you travel a lot for your job.
You'll probably never grow as a person, but I'm lucky enough that I get to travel for work. But the main thing that I brought up is like where we live and grew up in a very rural area. If that makes sense.
In the Midwest.
Right. So I never even really had a conversation with a black person until college.
Which is mind-blowing, honestly. But yeah, we just grew up in an area that was very not diverse at all. And so it was kind of a culture shock for us to go to college, but also very welcome because of the type of people that we are.
For sure, because that's an instantaneous growing situation.
And just, I've always loved learning about different cultures and different people. I mean, people just fascinate me.
Right.
So I've always been the type of person that just like wants to hear about, how people live in different areas and, what their culture is like, and just Because it gets boring doing the same things or talking to the same people
Right.
over and over and over again. And I've never understood that perspective of why you would be afraid to learn too. I mean, I get it now. There's stuff we could get into in
Right.
different topics or different podcasts later on. But, you know, I've always been the type of person that likes to learn new things. So I'm naturally curious, and luckily you are too.
Right.
So we get along that way
Yeah.
because we're both constantly wanting to learn about different things.
Well, and that was the great part about that. It was a friend of mine from college, and we ran track together. But it was one of those of, I grew up that way. There was a quote unquote fear, but it was also because I just never been around anybody else. It's such a very
They keep you isolated.
Right.
And then, you know, it's very, very easy to isolate yourself in a rural community. And, you know.
But instantly, if you start asking questions like, hey, where are you from? What are your brothers and sisters like? How was life? You're going to start finding all these common grounds, and all of these people that you are, quote, afraid of or told to be afraid of, you'll realize, wait, they're just other people.
Yeah. Yeah. No matter the background, no matter where they're from. And I feel like it's very interesting right now with the whole going off on another tangent here, but there's the TikTok ban going on right now, which who knows what's going to happen with that. It's all kind of crazy. But the funniest thing that I think about it is the whole idea was, you know, they're trying to keep China as an enemy, which politically, I get it. All of that stuff, history, communism, all of that stuff, whatever. But the people are just people. And it's very interesting because all the people that are like, I'm mad that they're banning TikTok, are going over to this other app called, I think it's Red Note or something, which is a full-on Chinese app, and it's just Chinese people and culture and stuff. It's their approved, quote-unquote, TikTok in that country. And Americans can get it at the moment. It's probably going to get banned too. But the point of it is people are going over there and they're talking with each other. And it's just like, why are we afraid of each other? We're literally just people trying to live our lives, trying to make it through the world, raise our kids, have our pets. And there's so much more in common than people realize, you know. And I feel like there is this struggle to try to keep people separate a lot of times, which is
for sure
very unfortunate. And I think creates a lot of tension all over the place, honestly. But it's the same thing. It's like, people from America, from different countries are going over onto that app and meeting each other. And it's just like, oh, we're from different countries and cultures, but we're still all very much a lot alike in a lot of ways. Have similar hobbies, like to do the similar things. Everybody likes cooking videos.
That's
that
true.
kind of thing. Everybody loves cat videos.
Yeah.
So it's just interesting that people will naturally be curious about each other and want to learn about each other when we're not like being separated for some stupid political thing.
Right.
You know?
Also, if you are a person that is afraid of TikTok because they are China and they steal all of your information, I hope you're not on any other social medias because I know everyone's talking about TikTok.
If you have a smartphone at all, you know.
If you have anything, everyone has your information. So don't pretend like you think TikTok is
one
worse
app
because
is scarier
it's
than the other because they're all like that.
Yes.
So I just think it's funny, the whole discord that's going on about the whole thing right now. And again, like, you know, we're in the midst of it right now, but who knows what's going to happen with all of that. And you know what? In 6 months, there will be a whole another app that everybody will be arguing about. So
oh, man.
That's kind of how it goes. We kind of roll with the punches growing up the way that we did, you know, grew up analog before all this digital stuff happened. And then, you know, everything and the internet just kind of exploding when we're teenagers and college age. And then here we are. And it just keeps on trucking.
Are we those old people now that are like, I was alive before the internet?
Yeah, I'm older than Google, which is weird to say that.
I didn't have a cell phone till I was in college.
It's a weird time to be alive.
It is.
You know.
That's the whole...
And that's the point of the episode.
Be
curious about all of it.
Yes.
Learn about all of it. Because otherwise you're just going to be confused and be sitting in your rocking chair one day and be like, what happened?
Maybe that's why we like to be curious, because we don't want to become stagnant and just sitting in a chair all day.
No.
Even though I would love to do that.
I naturally just want to learn. So.
I would love to take a nap.
You always do anyway.
Right now.
Right now.
Yep.
Just conk out. There
yep.
you go. So yeah, I do. I feel like a lot of the tension that's in society right now and everything is just that, is people not knowing and just being judgmental about things. But it's so easy to learn if you just keep an open mind. And then that fear kind of falls away. Honestly, I feel like,
Yeah.
and that was the thing for me, like getting through the pandemic. Honestly, I was listening to people and learning about it because at first we were all panicked, right?
For sure.
Nobody knew what was
We're
going
all
on.
Windexing our
our groceries,
groceries.
our groceries.
We're like, yeah.
We were just talking about that the other day, how ludicrous really it was. But at the same time, I mean, I'm a naturally anxious person. I have generalized anxiety disorder. And so it's like, that was a very scary time for me. But what helps me to calm myself down is to learn about things. So
Yep.
I don't know, that helped me because once I started to learn from the scientists, from, people on the ground that were doing things, the less anxious I became, because then I was like, okay, there's no point in Windexing her
That
groceries.
should be actually
That
the
kind of
point
thing.
of this entire podcast. If anybody's listening to this, it should be the more you learn and the more you grow and the more knowledge you have, the more books you read, the more you will become less frightened of everything around you.
Maybe. Like I said, there's that ignorance is bliss thing too, though, because you can have the opposite effect. Like if you don't know who you're listening to, because that's the thing we tell our kids.
That's true.
Don't WebMD anything if you think there's something wrong with you, because that's the opposite of that, right? You learn too much, and then
Right.
you're like, oh crap, nothing's good. So,
But you know what I mean? Like
Yeah, I
it's
do.
it's one of those where you can stay forcibly cut off from everything. And I found in my perspective, or the people that I've talked to over since COVID or whatever, are the people that have not really looked up anything or done
Mhm.
anything or read any actual articles or tend to be the most afraid
Mhm.
of everything because
Or they're listening to the wrong things, because
That might be true,
media
too.
literacy is hard right now. It is very difficult if you don't know, the trusted sources, and that's the problem right now, is everybody thinks that the sources that they're getting are the trusted sources, but there's this huge confirmation bias. It's like when you want to learn something, you go on the internet, it's very easy to learn and have all of this stuff support what you think it is.
well,
But
we're-
that's why I'm like, being curious, I think, forces you to acknowledge the different viewpoints
Yes.
and then come together. Yeah, our kids are in speech and debate right now, and they're
Mhm.
learning about this. It's like when you go into the debate class, it's like you got to learn both sides and figure out of an argument. And I think that's really useful in a lot of areas. It's like, well, you can't just completely disregard a different side that you're not used to, because it's there, right? And you might change your mind about stuff and you might learn something new. So,
Well, we're also in a time that's very difficult because we're in a place where fact and opinion are
Are-
held on the same level.
and that's difficult for a lot of people too.
Yes.
And it's difficult to wade through some of those things to find out, well, what is really fact and what is really opinion. And it's gotten a lot of people into a lot of trouble lately, but
That's true.
I don't know how to fix some of that stuff, honestly. I don't think there is a way to.
Man, if we started
this
this
point.
podcast to try to fix any problems,
No, it's
the whole thing is you just be watching us going, like, hand on our head and going, I don't know what to do. This world is so confusing.
well, and that is the trouble too for people that are open-minded about certain things, because there is this whole world. Well, like you said, it goes back to trying to have conversations with people that are very like one-sided on
Yep.
things, and they don't want to hear any other opinions or facts or anything like that. They just want their position to be confirmed
and validated.
and validated, and they don't, whether it's true or not, frankly. And that gets very, 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 very frustrating.
Well, and we also live in a time where lying is acceptable. And if you lie enough, then it becomes the truth. So it's such a hard, confusing
I get it.
time in history
I
to
get it.
figure out what is real and what is not.
Yeah. And I guess that's kind of my only advice, is going in when you're hearing things, especially when it's about people. If you're hearing something about a group of people, but you're not listening to the people in that group, that's your first mistake.
Yes.
Right? I feel like you can go on in any topics, whatever we're talking about here, whatever minority group or whatever. And if you're listening to all of this chatter, but you're not actually listening to the voices that it affects, then you're not learning anything.
Right.
Honestly. And I feel like I've tried to do a good job of that, of making sure when I'm like, I don't understand something, or I don't understand like this group of people, or why are they like, I don't want to necessarily get into it, but the whole trans thing right now, instead of me just completely like thinking it's completely ludicrous and these people are awful or whatever, because I hear all of this stuff all the time. Instead of being judgmental about that group, I went and learned about it.
Right.
Because I didn't understand it. I didn't understand where they were coming from. So guess what? I went and I read interviews of actual trans people. I've met some at this point now. And it's just like when you listen to people and their actual life, it changes your perspective on things.
Right.
And I encourage anybody, particularly with groups like that, if you're not understanding it, go find out about that. Understand where they're coming from. And don't just listen to people berating them all the time.
Right.
So.
Well, but it's so hard too, because you're being told and being taught that this is evil and you should fear them. So it's hard to even be like, oh, should I actually go talk? Nobody is the level of probably what a lot of people say they are.
Exactly. And that's not. And that's, I think, the saddest thing about all of it. And you can go out throughout history. There's always some sort of minority group that is being targeted or being made, quote unquote, the other. And it's just so infuriating for me to sit back and listen to that kind of stuff, because it's just like, we're all people. At the end of the day, we're all on the same playing field. And I think that's a lot of why people are judgmental, is because it makes them feel superior. It makes them feel more important, because if they can other somebody else,
that's true.
If they can, bring somebody else down, then that makes them feel more important. And when all is said and done, I don't think this ever even benefits anybody in the end of the,
Well, and as long as we're all fighting each other, then everyone up top is kind of just sitting in the back going, hee, 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 hee.
Yeah.
So it doesn't matter if we're Republican or Democrat. It's all
made up.
They're all trying to screw us against each other in general.
And it's just, at the end of the day, people are people. And I think if we just try to remember that, I think we could get along a lot better. But, who's going to listen to me about some of that stuff?
Not me.
Yeah, you're not going to. Anyway. So, yeah, I mean, going back into that, overall in general, I think that helps people in the real world, but also I think it's helped our parenting style. We got into that a little bit. But for the same reasons, it's like when we were really, really struggling with Cameron at the very beginning, this was probably 7 years ago now. All of this started to happen with our family when we started to learn how neurodivergent our family actually was. Cam was struggling in school. And
who is our oldest?
Who's about to turn 18.
Who's almost
crazy,
ready to graduate and go to college.
And this kid has put in the work. Let's just say that.
For sure.
But it did really, when they were struggling, it put it in perspective that we really, really needed to reevaluate how we came at parenting. We started going to therapy and learning more about ourselves, which I will say that helped probably a lot more than anything else, was just learning about ourselves and, having the humility to understand that, okay, we're the problem sometimes.
Yeah.
And I do hear that from a lot of therapists going forward now that I've talked to, is like a lot of times when your kid needs a lot of help, it's honestly the parents that need the help in communicating and whatnot, because we were never taught to, frankly.
Right.
So, yeah, I feel like it's a lot easier for us now to parent because we come at it from a curiosity standpoint. It was like, well, how can we help this? How can we what's really going on here rather than just jumping to a conclusion of, well, you're just a bad kid or you're just lazy or because we got that too. It's just like, well.
Or the instantaneous, my house, my rules,
Yeah.
I'm the parent, you will do exactly what I say.
Which isn't, Tim, in my perspective now, isn't fair because,
Yeah.
they don't have a choice in it, the kids. It's like they didn't ask to be here. We're the ones that decided to have kids.
Right.
They didn't choose what family they got born into or anything like that. None of us do. But we can try as parents to foster a place where we can actually talk to each other and communicate with each other and try to understand each other's perspectives. Obviously, it's pretty difficult because they're kids and they don't know anything. So it's like there's a level of you got to keep them safe too. But at the same time, we still try to get their opinions on things. And our kids are a lot more articulate than I realized a lot of kids their age are.
For sure. And
So-
we've had a lot of teachers over the years say the same thing, but that's something that we like to do, whether it's at dinner time or whenever. We'll have family meetings and kind of talk through things and go, you're fighting with your sibling, what's happening? But we've taught and grown together to the point where we will all listen, take that criticism internally and go, okay, well, maybe I did do something, then I can apologize. But it's one of those of...
It's a safe place.
Yes.
Like there's gonna be no judgment. There's not gonna be any like reprimand for speaking your mind
Right.
in our house anymore. So I can't say it was always like that. Like I said, even as parents, especially when you're getting into the teenage years, you really have to take a step back and be like, is my parenting actually helping?
Right. Yeah.
Or, I hear all the time, parents having these power struggles with their kids. And we did too. They're at the very beginning. But I think it's all a part of perspective and just being like, where is this coming from? And it doesn't have to be a power struggle all the time.
Right.
Especially if the parent can step back and just be like, okay, this kid is trying to really find their place in the world. They're trying to understand how they feel about things. And if we're not coaching them to understand, well, like you said, it goes back to the men and the emotions thing and stuff too. You got to teach your kids what emotions are like. And it's so funny to me, all these people that are trying to get rid of stuff like that at school and just, it's like, do you not understand how important learning about how you feel about things can help just society in general? And so again, that's a subject for another episode.
We are at the
probably.
point in our lives right now where every situation that comes up, we just kind of have to do like a face palm.
Yeah.
Like,
there's a
I
lot
do
of that.
not know what is happening right now.
Yeah, it's tough. But so anyway, I do think it's funny now going, because we've tried to do this with us as a group, as a family, and how to communicate better, that now if the kids are like fighting with each other or having an issue, we'll walk in the room and they're just sitting together being like, okay, well, when you said this, it made me feel like this, or if I said this, I didn't mean it. This is what I meant, and they're having a natural conversation instead of yelling and screaming at each other. Because that's what siblings did when I was growing up, is they just went at each other and there was no compromise. There was no understanding. There was just, I hit you first, I hit you back. Now, we don't talk to each other.
Yeah.
So it's kind of interesting going forward now with our kids. And I'm proud of them and I'm proud of us for, teaching them how to do that. And it's just made for a much tighter family unit and made for a much less chaotic family life.
But like you were saying,
all our kids are very homebodied, so they just want to be home now.
Yeah.
And I think it's because we fostered that. We've fostered that everybody can just be themselves. They can unmask. They can say what they say without hurting anybody's feelings.
Right.
And so I feel like we've at least done that right going forward.
And the similar thing to you saying being open-minded and growing as people, I think the reason that's also worked is because we're living that example for the children.
Yeah,
and
we do it with each other. We rarely fight. And if, we I don't know if we ever really fight in front of the kids. We rarely fight in general.
I would not say, yeah. Every once in a while, one of us might be like, give each other a look, and that's as far as we go, and we're like, oh, crap.
But we also...
Did we just fight, and we really didn't do anything?
We also try to check each other, but lovingly, obviously.
Yeah.
But, like, if one of us is out of line about something, then we're just like, hey, I think we need to talk about that.
Yeah.
And we don't get defensive. We don't get... we probably do to a point.
We do in the
don't.
moment because it's heated, but at the same time, there's a definite level of mutual respect where I know that if you're coming to me and you're saying, hey, the reason this and one of the kids is going down is because you're being too abrasive or too whatever in this situation.
And we do have to check each other. You checked me the other morning because Cora and I are not morning people. And Cora and I are also going through a lot of hormonal changes right now because she's a preteen and I'm going through perimenopause.
Yeah.
And we're just like, I don't have the patience for this morning.
Yeah.
So you're kind of like, you have to keep us.
There are certain mornings, where I'm definitely like, I can tell they're both not on a good level right now, and you're just battling each other. But I'm watching it, going, well, the reason you're both heightened is because you're doing it to each other,
and you're just tired. So stop
That's true.
talking.
Grab a Snickers.
That's what it feels like a lot of times.
It probably does.
We'll get through it. That's the same thing. You just have to practice a lot of patience, I think, and check yourself when you need it, honestly. And I don't think a lot of people do that very often. They don't check themselves. So,
for some reason, I think people find checking themselves, or like we were talking about earlier, they see that as a weakness.
Yeah.
Instead of a strength of growing as a person, they think, oh, well, if I back down, then instantly I'm the lesser person.
Maybe.
Rather than sometimes I've had arguments with people. I fly a lot and I do a lot for a living, and I find people in the airport sometimes that are just horrific people. And sometimes you just have to either walk away or don't even engage. You know what I mean?
Oh, yeah. There's that. You got to recognize when it's like, this person's not going to learn anything.
Like
this person is not willing to learn anything.
I saw Keanu Reeves on a thing at one point where he's like, I'm at the point in my life where if you say 2 + 2 is 5, I'll go, you're right, man. That's
Go
amazing. High five. And then just let them do their thing. Because
I don't need to be part of this.
Yeah, some people are just wanting that conflict and that conversation and that fight with you. And sometimes you're actually winning when you go, nah, I'm out.
I'm disengaging.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I've had to do that too. It's just like, I'm not going to do this. I've always been a non-drama type person though, too. It's like, I just don't, you're going to get in there just to create negative energy or to just be contrary. Then I'm like, I don't need to be part of that.
I don't know. The older we get, the more I feel
the more I want to be contrary.
Yeah, the more I kind of want to.
Yeah, I'm going to push back a little bit.
Be that kind of like true. Poke the bear.
I never have before, but lately, the past couple of years, I've just been like, I'm not going to let that slide. I'm not just going to let you say that, and there's no repercussions for that, even if it's just to make you think, like, did you really just say that? But
well, especially because we're talking about the misinformation age, and there's a lot of people sharing it, so sometimes you do need to
check it.
And sometimes there's people that are friends of yours that will take that if they share a post or they do a thing, and you kind of go, hey, this isn't real. You're just kind of spreading a fear point that people are trying to spread. And some people take that well, and some people will just delete your comment and go, nope,
that's true.
This fits my personal view, and that's all I care about.
So, yeah, it's a interesting time for sure.
For sure.
But I do appreciate learning about things. And I will listen to somebody if they have different viewpoints and stuff like that. And then it's just determining, okay, well, can I take any of that and it be useful to me? Or, maybe I hadn't thought about it from that perspective.
Right.
Did you not turn the air off?
I did forget to turn the air off, so I'm doing it now. It's probably not showing up or being heard on our microphones, but if it is, I'm going to go ahead and turn it off just in case.
Anyway.
Fun times.
Yeah. So
hey, luckily we're pretty close to the end though when that kicked in, rather than being right at the beginning. It's like,
bothering you the whole time that your ADHD gets set off?
Dude, I haven't taken my meds today, so
that's a problem.
No, it's a major problem. I've got the computer screen, I've got this, I've got you,
Why
I've got the camera,
Okay.
I've got the air
You're like, why are we
conditioner.
doing this now then? It's like, oh, because the kids aren't here.
Yeah,
That's
that's
easier.
probably true.
Anyway.
So, thank you guys for joining us for this episode of the podcast. Next time, I will take my medication.
Beforehand.
Yeah.
Be a little less all over the place, maybe.
Indeed.
Yeah. But yeah, as we go, we're going to try to keep doing stuff like this and talk about topics that we find really interesting and that we've been learning about and feel like other people can, relate to. So,
Or even stuff like this that we've learned throughout our family and kind of going, hey, because we, quote, swallowed our pride and
that's
kind of
a lot of it, honestly.
and kind
a lot
of
of times.
grew as people, it's made our family dynamic with the five of us, with you and me and the kids, so much better because I am very impressed because I travel a lot for work. I'm an entertainer. I work on Disney Cruise Line, so I see a lot of other families when I'm out by myself. And man, you can just see things happening. And so it makes me really proud that we've swallowed our pride.
And thankful.
And that
because it's
we've-
a lot less chaotic.
Man,
now.
and we've grown and learned, and our kids, we're just super tight, and it's going to be really rough when Cam goes off to college. So I am not ready for that, having
Yep.
one less child in the house.
It's going to be a trip. That's
So,
for sure.
Instead of crying at the end of this episode, we're going to go ahead and end it there. Thank you guys for hanging out. We're going to get back into the flow for the next couple of episodes as well. If you like it, feel free to go over to your listening platform of choice. Leave us a review. That will help other people find us as well. And we'll see you next time on the podcast. And thank you guys. Oh, wait, I hit the wrong one.
Guys. Oh,
Might as well do this.
quick ASMR break to remind you to go and rate and review the podcast.
It's hard to hold it for a long time.
It really does help people find us.
And now, back to the podcast. That's my rate
was
and
an
review button that I hit, and I hit the wrong one. So I'll hit the correct one. How about that?
Okay.
And then that way we can start doing the outro. Thank you guys so much for hanging out with us. We'll see you next time on the Happily Ever Laughter podcast. Bye, guys.